Today, I'm going to be discussing some of the key findings from our latest Wunderman Thompson global proprietary initiative called Wunderman Thompson Inspire. It's a first of its kind study that reveals why brands need to be inspirational, how inspiration drives growth, and what brands can do to inspire their customers. But before I get into the study and what was some of the findings and the diagnostic tool that resulted out of it, I wanted to start with a story that encapsulates for me what inspiration means and the power of it. This is an image that you should, or all of us are familiar with. It's the 28th of August, 1963, and there's approximately 250,000 people gathered to watch Martin Luther King Jr. speak. Now, some background into the speech is that King had struggled with it. It was supposed to be kept to 5 minutes, and his advisors had argued about the contents. The consensus was that the speech should be a bit lower key, since he was speaking to quite a broad base audience and about controversial themes. But during the speech, King reached a sentence that felt a bit clunky. And at that moment, seated not far from him was the gospel singer Mahalia Jackson, who was a friend and follower of Martin Luther King. She shouted out to him, and she shouted, "Tell them about the dream, Martin. Tell them about the dream." And what you then see on the footage is that he takes the text of the written speech that he's prepared. He slides it to the left of him and the lectern, grabs the lectern, looks out at the 250,000 people gathered there, looking back at him, and he begins to ad-lib the rest of the speech. And the words that followed was, "I have a dream." This, as we know, became the rallying cry for the civil rights movement. And the reason I want to speak to this is because he did not say, "I have a reason to believe," or a PowerPoint presentation, or even a proposed piece of legislature. Through his inspired vision and view of the world, he summoned people, not argued them into conviction. Now, Wunderman Thompson is a company that has a mission defined as inspiring growth for ambitious brands. But for us, this is more than just a positioning, it's actually our belief. And that provoked a question: how does inspiration lead to growth? So, as a result of recessionary cycles and the global pandemic's subsequent impact on our brands, we knew that for ourselves and for our clients, growth was hard to come by. But we believed that brands that inspire grow, and we set out to validate this hypothesis. What resulted was a diagnostic tool and a clear causal link between brand investment and hard commerciality. So first, we needed to understand for ourselves, what is inspiration? Now, in a personal context, that is an easy question to answer. Inspiration is the feeling of new possibilities in front of us, and that we can make a change or do something exciting and personally meaningful. But in a brand context, that's a tougher question to understand, to answer. So one of the first things that we uncovered was that inspiration is not this state, this finite thing that maybe it happens to you and you're struck by it. It's actually a process. And it's a process that ultimately expands your possibilities and not only makes you feel the desire to do something new or be different, but it also compels you to feel enabled to act. So for it to be true inspiration, a person must be inspired by something and inspired to do something. So there's it's an active thing. It's not a passive thing. Now, when we describe inspiration as a process, it's actually a model that exists, the transmission model of inspiration. And this kind of like unpacks the process, right? On the left is the antecedents. So I'm going about my life and I encounter something in a brand's characteristics that reflects or connects with something in my characteristics or values. And I feel inspired to do something, go out and act in a different way. And I also feel differently. So the most important part for brands is that inspiring experiences, and it might be communication or an experience of a communication or an outside event of any kind that resonates with a person's values, it makes them feel like their dreams or goals and aspirations are possible. So inspiration ultimately, yes, is a positive state because it inspires you to set a bigger goal and achieve it. But ultimately, it's not just about good emotions and evoking good emotions. It's more importantly about behavioral change. And this is why it starts to become very meaningful in our world. Now, I really love this quote that came out of some of the research. Inspiration propels a person from apathy to possibility and transforms the way we perceive our own capabilities. So, when we ask the question, why is this meaningful for brands? The answer is pretty clear because this is not fluffy chat about purpose that often gets bandied about. This is about driving hard sale. This is the proven link between brand investment and hard commerciality, between creating what a brand means in the world and that brand and business having better sales outcomes. So this, I mean, when I'm saying this, I know for many people listening, this is really a bit of a bold, provocative statement to make. And I wanted to sort of resolve that and add some credibility to it by starting by talking about methodology behind this research. Because foremost, and especially as strategists, that is the ask behind our research and findings. Not just what is the insight, but what is the methodology that landed you at that particular insight. So from a methodology perspective, it's been quite a robust experience, and it's quite acute, the diagnosis that comes out of it. And one of the reasons is because it started off with this qualitative exercise of academic research, and what it presented is that inspiration is not a singular thing. It's actually determined by three core characteristics, or I like to refer to them as dimensions of inspiration. The first is elevating, the second is magnetic, and the third is motivating. Now, I'm going to unpack these and really deep dive into these, what those characteristics mean in a second. But second to the qualitative exercise, and you'll see some of the quotes in the transmission model has come out of the research, the academic exercise. The second part of that was to make it relevant in a marketing context by using the BrandZ dataset. Now, for many of you on the call, you do know the BrandZ dataset. It's one of the most reliable and trusted marketing datasets in the world. One of the reasons it's so reliable and reputable is it covers 33,000 brands in 183 categories across 45 markets to quantify the strength of brand inspiration and its impact on growth. So we could then create a score identifying bits brands were best at and where they were lacking or under indexing on in terms of those three core characteristics. The combined result was a clear way to identify inspirational brands and score them on how inspirational they were and where they were under indexing. Crucially, we wanted to know did the inspiration score become a predictor of growth? And I'm happy to share with you today that it is. It's a very powerful and stable predictor of growth. Finally, all of this was sense checked with a real world audience. So a SONA study was conducted with 4,000 respondents to see if brands that had scored high on the diagnostic tool, actually it correlated with what people said. And of course, that did check out as well. So the robustness of this research exercise and approach helped us to create a very acute diagnosis. And I wanted to share some of the key findings today from the diagnostic tool that was just before the diagnostic tool that was created. So some key elements that are really important for us when we talk about it. I mean, on a high level, in terms of the white paper that was released, that's quite freely available, is brands, the inspiration proved to be a hugely significant human motivator. So brands that serve as agents of inspiration actually create stronger emotional brands with consumers And once they do that, those connections are more difficult to break. And I think probably the greatest opportunity that exists for us is that there is a huge inspiration gap waiting to be captured by all of us in the world and in marketing, particularly. We found that while brands may be inspiring today, they're not doing well enough. 72% of customers said that they wanted brands to be inspirational, but only 53% experienced brands as inspirational. And this presented a significant inspiration gap. So that offers a major growth opportunity, an immediate growth opportunity. With regards to prediction, inspiration predicts 63% of the variation in consumer demand for brands, 52% of the brand's ability to command higher prices, and 48% of the brand's ability to convert customers at the point of purchase. I want to just contrast this with awareness, because for everybody here listening today, you have had a brief or a KPI that was linked to awareness. In contrast to awareness, which only accounts for 4% of a price elasticity and 19% of market share. So there's a significantly larger motive to chase inspiration and an inspire score rather as an indicator of growth and potential growth. Simply put, it's not just about whether or not people think of your brand, but it's more important what they think of your brand and what they determine and how they experience your brand, and whether or not that they experience it as inspiring. One of the other really key outtakes of the research paper is we were able to rank the 100 most inspirational brands in the world. We even have a market specific one for South Africa, but I wanted to share the global ranking. So if you look at this, it's not just, there's like a really great mix of brands for you to look at in terms of, and I'm sure you identify them from their logos. But it's not surprising tech brands excel. I mean, for us, tech is always an exciting, inspirational category. It's in their models, it's in their innovation. This is inspiring that they create the next frontier for us all the time. So they naturally excel with inspiration. But what's really clear here is that there's two things. The first is that if you look at these logos, their campaigns, their products, their services, their communication, you'll remember them. You'll be able to say, that's the line. It's finger licking good for KFC. It's just do it for Nike. It comes to mind. So they really have that salience. You'd experience them as inspiring. You'd be able to communicate back to me, what is their inspiring story? What are they projecting that is inspiring to you? But also why I like looking at the ranking is because what's very clear, and probably more importantly, is that whether you sell a sports car or bar of soap, you can be an inspiring brand and create an inspiring brand. Earlier, I mentioned that out of the academic research, there was these 3 dimensions and characteristics of inspiration, and we've distilled them and translated them into a brand environment. So I wanted to just kind of deep dive on the 3 characteristics, and hopefully you can sit and reflect on your own brands and your own clients. When I'm speaking to these characteristics, you'll be able to assess, well, this is what we really excel at, and this is what we don't. The first is elevating. This is about how meaningful the brand is. I think in the marketing world, we talk about meaningfulness. It's the brand's ability to raise expectations, connect with the values of consumers, and help them commit to realizing their ideals. Now, interestingly, you'll see these sort of subtexts within each dimension of inspiration. So the 3 dimension, each dimension has a further 2 tenets. So we can actually separate that elevating is made up of 2 tenets: how we indicate how we make people's lives better, and how we communicate how we care for customers. So I think a really good example, and one that ranks really highly all the time, is Dove, because Dove really makes you feel differently. And it's so elementary, because largely, I mean, when you think of Dove, you think of bar of soap, but they've got this expansive product range. They've done these powerful ads that have literally kicked off entire movements of people talking about, especially in the female beauty segment, but also in male care, and how they the the personas that they develop and the way they reflect men back in society, and fathers in particular. So these brands, really good elevating brands, always put humanity first and demonstrate that they really care for their customers and care for all people at large. These are brands that are really purpose driven, and they talk about doing the right thing all the time. They talk about being purpose driven all the time. Fundamentally, when you buy this brand, if you buy a high indicator brand on elevating, you feel like you're doing something really good for buying that brand. The second is motivating. And what's really interesting is that motivating is generally ranked very highly, because this is what we've been doing for the last 50 years in marketing. It's all about differentiation. It's giving people clear and compelling reasons to act. These are brands that are not only unique and aim for that white space, but they also unique in a positive way. So they set trends, they stay ahead of the curve, and largely to the benefit of their customers, but also the category. It's made up of the tenants is something unique and shaking things up. IKEA is like a really good example of this. You feel like you can make a difference whether or not it's in your child's bedroom or the kitchen, and it includes clear and compelling reasons to act, especially from a price perspective and accessibility perspective. Finally, magnetic. So magnetic is all about brand salience. It's about the irresistibility and how brands demonstrate that they lead the category, and people by virtue obviously hear really good things about them. These are brands that spontaneously come to mind as the brand of choice. It's all about leadership, especially in categories. Amazon, Uber, I mean, they're so ubiquitous with the category. They're so talked about. You actually have to fight yourself off to not engage with them. One of the things when we use these characteristics, and especially the diagnostic tool, is that we find that they're relational. So it's, you don't just have to chase an elevating score or chase a motivating score, but in the dashboard it gives us an overall inspire score, which we'll have a view of. But it's about making sure that they kind of have a knock-on effect. So if your brand is not just differentiated, it's meaningfully differentiated, that ultimately has a knock-on effect on your brand salience. So we're able to assess the weak points, relationally use one to uptick the other sometimes. So I talk about the diagnostic tool, and for the purposes of today's discussion, I'm not going to give you various views of it, but we've actually created a dashboard called Inspire from the data and the learnings that I've spoken to. And the Inspire dashboard is something that we can use all the time to immediately track and diagnose our brands. This is a view of the dashboard within South Africa. I specifically chose the mobile phones category because obviously with the Inspire score, it's very clear that with the overall rankings, it's very clear that you can see that tech brands excel. So obviously with the dashboard that's based on Brandsy data, we can assess 33,000 brands in 183 categories in 45 markets. And thankfully, South Africa is one of those markets. So what you see is that each brand, how they've scored on each dimension, and then the overall ranking or overall Inspire score. You'll be able to very acutely tell your clients, well, this is what the overall benchmark for the industry for your category is, and this is where you are particularly under indexing. And I think it really is a great way to begin a meaningful discussion with clients, to talk to them, not just you need to be inspiring or you need to blanket term be purposeful, you blanket term need to be creative. And how do we define creative? Is that or purposeful? Is that we win awards? No, this is being able to specifically see the psychographic connection points that we're having with consumers, and where we're lacking. And this could obviously create even more meaningful discussions in terms of the business model, the business strategy as well. And then there's various ways we can highlight it, massive dashboard views. But one thing I wanted to show you is that we can acutely diagnose within the tenant the dimensions to the tenants as well. So this is the same view of the South African category at the top for mobile phones, and you can see that Samsung kind of leads the way more than they hear good things, and that kind of pops up the overall magnetic score. But from a global perspective, I wanted to also give you culture leaders in terms of having high magnetic scores and enjoying and really having really great index rates in terms of the two tenants that define magnetic. And you can see Nike's up there with Google because these are brands that really stand out. They invest in leading the way. They want their products, their services, their communications in every part of their brand world to demonstrate leading the way and hearing good things about them. And I haven't had our time doesn't allow me to pay a ton of Nike ads. But one of the things that I would like to highlight is that sometimes they have a longer term strategy of leading the way. So they don't get caught up on whether they trend negatively today or tomorrow or per season, but they know where their growth market is and they know how to align and communicate with them to demonstrate that they are leading the way and they're meeting them in the future. Um, while this tool is quite a hugely significant thing, and I did want to share it with you today, I think, and it's hugely advantageous to our everyday lives as strategists and marketers. I think the principle remains, and that's ultimately what I wanted to share with you today from the research. And that is to say, inspiration is a proven indicator of brand growth. Brands that inspire their customers are more apt to boost their market share, charge higher prices, and convert and retain customers at the point of purchase. So, growth is the end game. If you are having a meaningful discussion with a business or a brand about growth, and I'm talking hard commerciality, then from a brand investment side, from a marketing side, from a communication side, you need to be having a real conversation about inspiration and the role that's going to play in their future communication. There's this famous saying in advertising that it's advertising when you do it wrong and culture when you do it right. And I believe that this research has allowed us to move from aspiring to achieve that myth to actually having a clear method. I started today talking to you about a moment of inspiration that was meaningful to me, from an inspired vision that Martin Luther King had in the world. But I hope today when I leave you feeling clear that inspiration matters now more than ever, not just for the growth of your brands and businesses, but more importantly, to the people that we seek to communicate with and serve every day. Inspiration should no longer be about platitudes, but rather should be the plan to create your next great inspiring brand growth story. Thank you. I'm gonna leave it there, Aaron, for you to let me know if there's any questions or comments.
Okay, one question is about how can we access this tool? Candace is asking. You mentioned about a tool. Do you know what she's referring to?
So in terms of the dashboard and the diagnostic tool that I showed you today, the actual Inspire tool that we use within Wunderman, it's accessible for free to all our clients. So it's integrated into our ways of work. Like I said, we can't inspire growth for ambitious brands without that being part of our model. The white paper research and the findings of the study is available online for people to download and engage with. Interestingly, is that we've also developed a segmentation extension of this. So not just looking from a brand side, but understanding more from a customer segmentation analysis, persona mapping side. So there's been a huge research exercise. And the ambition or the claim is that the largest study into inspiration ever. And they've asked really acute, comprehensive questions of a large focus group of people across the world and in very key markets about how inspiration matters to them and how they experience it. So if you have the diagnosis, if you're a client from a diagnostic perspective, you have access to the tool as a Wonderman client, you'd be able to then segment against the segmentation model, which is also manifested in a dashboard. But I think that, like, the tool aside, the findings are out there. They're very key. I think that they give us a very clear understanding of where we should be concentrating our efforts.
Excellent. Thank you for answering that. There's a good question here. It's about how can we adopt inspiration into content marketing?
So, I mean, it's not like a kind of either or. When we talk about inspiring and brand growth, we talk in a very high level. And I think that is a question that we have spent the last. So the study came out and the tool came out at the beginning of this year, but we've spent the larger part of 2021 amongst ourselves as strategists unpacking. So cool, you've given me a diagnosis and you've given me, I buy the findings, but what does that mean for a tweet and what does that mean for a Facebook post? And we've spent time unpacking that into taking that dashboard and making it meaningful. What we found and created was a framework based of that to say that your magnetic, your elevating score, so your meaningfulness is the emotional engagement you have with the brand. Your motivating score is the experiential experience difference of the brand, and your magnetic score is the overall engagement value of the brand. So if you're looking at a content and a content strategy approach, I would say to look at your brand, to be able to say, what am I under indexing on? Am I really meaningful? Do I need to chase salience or differentiation in the category? And then you'd be able to say, well, I kind of under index on differentiation. I think this is an exercise that, like, even without the tool and the dashboard, you could do as a marketer, and then focus your content on being able to increase the indicators. So the dimensions is how you sort of strategize and divide the content, and then based off where you feel is your under indexing points, you would improve, you would higher increase the weighting of the content, or the weighting of how you differentiating from a comms perspective.
Excellent. Thank you very much for answering the questions. And for those that asked those questions, they were excellent as well. Thank you for the participation. So again, Parusha, you gave us a deep dive. You shared with us that research on inspiration. You showed the key findings, some examples of some brands that are doing it well, and those three key characteristics. Thank you for that presentation today. I'm going to now move you back to the audience,
Thank you.
and I'll introduce our next speaker. All right.